You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of me.
The Sega Dreamcast holds a special place in my heart. While I had played games on other systems before, the Dreamcast was the first time I was old enough to experience that thrill of getting a new console at launch. I burned countless hours on Sonic Adventure, Crazy Taxi, and all the various 2K sports titles. It's not a stretch to say that most nights for me in '99 and 2000 were spent getting my homework done as fast as possible so I could play more Dreamcast. Then my little kid heart was shattered as the love of my life was discontinued in 2001 because the rest of the world just couldn't appreciate the perfection of my beautiful Dreamcast. Though even I have to admit, there wasn't a whole lot the Dreamcast could do to make up for Sega's innate ability to rip defeat from the jaws of victory.
He found our weak point! Ooh, I knew I shouldn't have labeled it!
Seeing as how I grew up in the middle of nowhere, it was hard enough to find stores that stocked anything but the most popular Dreamcast titles beforehand. I had little choice but to move on to systems that I could actually find games for in my little corner of flyover country. Sometimes, though, I would deliberately pass over the ones that I came across in the wild because I was a stupid child. But there's one above all others that I adamantly refuse to forgive my younger self for passing up. Skies of Arcadia. My local rental store was clearing out their Dreamcast stock and had this for something like $10. You want to know what my dumb, stupid, moronic, absolutely idiotic child brain said upon looking at this cover? Ew, there's girls on the cover. I bet this is one of those stupid role-playing games about love and romance.
That's stupid! You're stupid! Stop being stupid!
If I had just bothered to look at the back of the case, I would have seen that what I had passed up was, in fact, a swashbuckling RPG about sky pirates, objectively the second coolest kind of pirate, which lets you pilot your own airship across a world of floating islands and battle other airships. And it would have only cost me $10. Oh, and it's also considered one of the best RPGs of its time. But instead of experiencing all of that back then, I wasn't able to get myself a copy until this year. And it cost me...
Hello, chumps.
Who would put a sign like that there?
Well, no sense in dwelling on the immense loathing that I'm feeling towards my younger self right now. I need to see if this was worth the damn near extortionate price I paid for it. Released in 2000 as a first-party Dreamcast exclusive, Skies of Arcadia, Eternal Arcadia in Japan, was developed by Overworks, who previously existed under the names CS2 R&D and AM7, an internal studio of Sega's responsible for the likes of Phantasy Star 4, Magic Knight Rayearth, and later on, the underrated PS2 version of Shinobi. Overworks' biggest claim to fame by this point, though,
In Japan.
was the Sakura Wars franchise, which they co-developed with Red Entertainment. With the insane popularity of Sakura Wars
In Japan.
helping to keep the lights on for Sega, I think it's safe to say that Overworks were a highly valued studio at the time. Speaking of highly valued, one name among Skies of Arcadia's staff sticks out the most to me: the late Rieko Kodama, director of the previously mentioned Phantasy Star 4 and Magic Knight Rayearth. She was also one of the creators of Phantasy Star itself. So, kind of a big deal for fans of Sega and fans of RPGs in general. Phoenix Rie, as she was sometimes known, is a bit of an unsung legend among Western gamers whose career at Sega stretched all the way back to Champion Boxing in 1984. While I highly doubt that she was literally the first woman to ever work on a Japanese video game, Kodama for sure appears to have been the first to achieve mainstream recognition. Having a major hand in creating Sega's equivalent to Dragon Quest tends to have that effect. In short, she deserved better than having her final home console game credit be that botched attempt to reboot Altered Beast on PS2. Seventh Dragon being fantastic doesn't make up for that, Sega. Here, Kodama oversaw the development on Skies of Arcadia as producer. To my understanding, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, video game producers back in ye olden days, particularly in Japan, were often as integral to a game's direction as the director themselves. Not in a shut up we're doing it this way because money kind of way, but as an actual part of the creative process. In particular, the producer role seems to have functioned as a way to keep an experienced hand overseeing a project while giving a younger designer the chance to stretch their directorial wings. In Skies of Arcadia's case, the director's chair was filled by either Shuntaro Tanaka or Atsushi Semiya. Or both, I guess. I'm unsure because of the weird way they chose to format Skies of Arcadia's credits. First you have Tanaka listed as director under Skies of Arcadia staff, but then a bit later you get Semiya credited for the same role under original development staff. Did one replace the other? Did they split responsibilities? Was there some inter-office politicking at play? I have no clue, and future me is probably already livid at how long this preamble is taking to edit. So let's do him a favor and just assume Tanaka and Semiya were co-directors. Sky Pirates, a studio at the height of their success, Sky Pirates, an esteemed industry veteran at the helm, Sky Pirates, two directors to presumably split the workload, and most importantly, Sky Pirates. How could Skies of Arcadia have possibly failed to set the sales charts ablaze? Alright, Dreamcast.
Oh, I made myself sad.
Skies of Arcadia stars the Blue Rogue, Vice. Blue Rogues are the Robin Hood types of Arcadia's setting, only stealing from corrupt merchants and warships of the expansionist Valuan Empire. The game hits the player with action right off the bat like any good swashbuckling tale should, with Vice and his friend who is a girl, Aika, raiding a Valuan vessel. And I'm just gonna reenact my initial reaction to this first fight. Vice dual wields cutlasses and holds the offhand one like a tonfa? That's dope as fuck! Oh hey, this combat system reminds me of Grandia. Is that a combat boomerang?
That was easy.
I am already completely in love with this game. Never in my life have I wanted so badly to go back in time and smack the shit out of myself. After being saved from a second consecutive fight by Vice's father, Captain Dine, and the rest of the crew of the Albatross, Vice and Aika head down into the bowels of the Valuan ship to nab whatever loot they can. In the process, they wind up saving a mysterious girl from the clutches of the foppish coward in command, Alfonso. One boss fight later, Vice and Aika are back on the Albatross looking after Little Miss Mystery, who introduces herself as Fina once she finally comes to. Despite being hesitant to reveal much about herself to them, Vice and Aika quickly take a shine to Fina and show her around their hideout on the aptly named Pirate Island. As the three end the day watching the sunset, they see a light streaking through the sky before impacting nearby Shrine Island. This is where we get some world building about Arcadia. The world is surrounded by 6 moons, each one a different color, and on occasion, small chunks of these moons fall to Arcadia. These moonstones power both magic and technology across the planet. Airships are incapable of flight without enough moonstone fuel, and spells can only be cast once one has enough affinity with the requisite moonstone element. Unable to resist the potential fortune awaiting them if they can recover that chunk on Shrine Island before anyone else, Vice and Aika leave Fina in the care of Vice's mom and head off. While they're gone, the Valuan Armada arrives at Pirate Island for a show of force, razing the town and scuttling the Albatross before hauling off every pirate as well as Fina. Demonstrating exactly why he's best boy, Vice refuses to give up and decides to search for a way to sneak into the fortified citadel that is Valua. A chance encounter with the resident Captain Ahab-alike, Drachma, and his ship the Littlejack gives Vice and Aika the opening they need while also introducing the player to the ship battle mechanics. And if I may pause my abridgment of the early game for another reenactment of my initial reaction... Oh shit, this is way more involved than I was expecting. Man, Overworks put a lot of effort into the presentation here. I should really cover Panzer Dragoon Saga on my channel at some point. This is gonna be so awesome once I get my own ship. Did anyone else hear that second to last one? That Panzer Dragoon Saga bit? I think my reenactment is broken. Saving Dine and the rest of the crew at the last minute from a public date with the Executioner's block, our heroes soon learn that Fina was taken away to a separate location. Refusing to leave their new friend behind, Vice and Aika risk the wrath of Grand Admiral Galcian, head of the Valuan Armada and master of the intimidating Slow Walk, to save Fina. One epic escape by the skin of their teeth later, and a grateful Fina at last opens up to explain who she is and why the Valuans want her so badly. Hailing from the long-thought-to-be-dead Sylvite civilization, Fina has been tasked by the Sylvite elders to find the 6 moon crystals and return them for safekeeping in the Silver Shrine. These crystals are powerful artifacts which once powered colossal war machines that ravaged Arcadia in the distant past, culminating in an ancient apocalyptic event known as the Reigns of Destruction. The Valuan Empire is seeking the moon crystals as well in order to revive those war machines and complete their conquest of the world. It's a race against time for Vice, Aika, and Fina, alongside an ever-rotating 4th party member, to beat Valua's eccentric cadre of admirals to the moon crystals and save the world. If this framework is starting to sound familiar, then congratulations, you've played a classic Japanese RPG before. However, Skies of Arcadia takes what could have been a negative and spins it into a core part of its charm, playing numerous tropes and cliches completely straight without a hint of irony or shame. Surrounded by its many dark and dour contemporaries, Skies of Arcadia stands beside Final Fantasy IX as a glowing tribute to the kind of optimistic storytelling that made the role-playing genre so popular on consoles in the first place. But before we get into more of my thoughts on the story, we should discuss how it plays. Let's start off much like the game itself does, and begin with the on-foot battle system. While I am reminded of Grandia with the general presentation, mechanically, it functions much closer to the conventional turn-based system you'd see in the likes of Dragon Quest. There's no dynamic turn order visible at the side, nor a need to wait for magic or a special attack to charge before it's unleashed. What is unique to Skies of Arcadia is its spirit point gauge up at the top here. This charges at a set level each turn and is required in order to do anything besides basic commands. Stronger spells and specials require higher amounts of SP, meaning that the player often has to choose between using a weaker option in order to save enough SP for another character that turn, or spending almost all of it on one big attack. Fortunately, both your max SP and how much you gain each turn will steadily increase as you level up, so those early specials and spells become much easier to use frequently. But in an interesting change, each one only uses a single magic point regardless of the strength of the spell. This makes it perfect for using strong healing magic between random encounters without having to burn through half your MP in the process. You'll still want to ration it a bit during the early game though, as MP is solely replenished by using expensive items or through resting at an inn. Leveling magic is another aspect that reminds me of Grandia, though rather than casting the same spell over and over again, magic XP gained at the end of each battle is distributed based on the moon element each party member's weapon is attuned to. In one of my favorite little touches, you can swap attunement at any time, even mid-battle. This makes grinding for magic a breeze, especially once I realized that setting the whole party to the same element increased the amount of XP each of them earned. In hindsight, I should have realized this early on when I saw that Vice was getting green XP even though I only had Aika attuned to green at the time. Instead, it took me all the way until Yafutomo before the neurons in my brain finally connected.
I dare to be stupid!
But the silver lining is that I didn't need to go out of my way to grind because the encounter rate in Skies of Arcadia is fucking ridiculous. Take 2 steps forward, encounter. Turn a corner, encounter. Open a chest, encounter. Series premiere of Star Trek The Next Generation, encounter at Farpoint. Disney movie I haven't seen yet, Encanto. Bit that's going on too long, this one. This encounter rate is high enough that apparently it was reduced by as much as half in the GameCube re-release Skies of Arcadia Legends. I've heard that version has added side content too. The problem is that both versions cost an arm and a leg, and I wanted to focus on the one I explicitly remember passing up back in the day. So it's kind of my own fault that I had to put up with this. Some of the random encounters in the early game can be downright brutal too. It's not often I play something outside of the Megami Tensei series where basic enemies are busting out instant kill spells. You'll definitely want to spend some of those moonberries you came across to get Aika's Delta Shield special as soon as possible. It may make your whole party immune to your own magic as well, but I'll be damned if it isn't worth it for the protection from Eternum. The curious thing is that most of this difficulty applies mainly to the early game, with the difficulty plateauing by around your second trip to Valua. By the mid to late game, you'll have enough SP that you'll be able to use Aika's strongest screen wipe on the first turn. At the same time, Vice's attack rating will have shot through the roof, making him able to one-shot most normal enemies and deal huge damage to bosses. You'll also be swimming in money by this point, enabling you to buy so many items that you'll never have to worry about leaving enough SP in reserve for healing spells. Then we have airship combat, which utilizes a completely different battle system. Each turn is divided up into 4 phases in which you can order a party member to attack, defend, cast magic, use items, or build up the SP gauge with focus. In certain circumstances, you'll be offered a special phase to use your ship's unique weapon, provided you have 20 SP ready to go. That can be tougher than you'd think when every offensive action costs SP inside of ship battles. In addition, you'll want to keep an eye on the color of the icon above each phase. These give you an idea of how risky it would be to attack during that moment. Finally, once Vice gets his own ship, you'll gain the ability to recruit additional crew members who provide unique boosts. Some are passive buffs which are always active, while others have to be activated during battle. In the latter's case, several of them will offer buffs which normally require you to cast a spell, except that these only cost you SP. They usually offer a stronger version for less SP than the equivalent spell, too. The ship battle mechanics are a lot to grasp initially, but once you get used to them, fights start to feel pretty simple. In a good way, I mean. Really, the only aspect here that I don't care for is how long it can take a turn to play out. Certain battles on foot can take a while if a lot of magic or specials are used in the same turn, but it pales in comparison to turns in the major ship battles. All these dynamic camera angles and moving parts are cool at first, but there were fights where I could finish setting up my turn, then get up for a piss break and still be back in time for the last phase to finish. This is where my borderline psychotic recording setup comes in handy.
Call the police.
This way I can have the fight playing out on my left monitor while I kick back and watch Getter Robo Armageddon on the right.
I'll escape and let the invaders finish you off.
I barely get what the hell's going on right now, but this is the greatest fucking thing I have ever watched. Now, before I impulse buy a copy of Getter Robo Daikessen off of eBay so that I have an excuse to do a video detailing why we should all believe in Getter, let's move on to Skies of Arcadia's presentation. Simply put, Skies of Arcadia is charming as fuck. And while the world itself is fascinating and fun to explore, and the soundtrack by Yutaka Minobe and Tatsuyuki Maeda appropriately buckles all the swashes, I believe it's the character designs and their expressive animations that are the real heroes here. There was a concerted effort to make sure these characters stuck in your mind long after you put the game down. On paper, things like Vice's eye patch monocle or everything about Admiral DeLoco shouldn't work, and yet they do. Hell, Vice, Aika, and Fina are so memorable that Shuntaro Tanaka was able to give them appearances in the first Valkyria Chronicles. Then there's the animation putting these great designs to even better use. Conceptually, the anime influence is clear from the get-go. I mean, the game is named after a Captain Harlock movie for Sonic's sake. But I believe this is one of the oldest 3D games I've played that is able to replicate the energy and bounciness of older anime, with a bit more bounce in some places than others.
That.
When I saw Vice and Aika's high five routine for the first time, I knew this game was going to be special. If you can get my jaded ass to crack a smile at a simple bit like this, then you're doing something right. Touches like this aren't limited to the main cast either. Look at this item shop owner here. This is probably the town you'll visit the least throughout your playthrough, and the devs still bothered to put such a memorable weirdo in this store. Even the airships feel like characters themselves with these designs. Every group has their own aesthetics to their ships to match the culture of where they came from. To provide a few examples, pirate ships resemble wooden galleons from the golden age of piracy for obvious reasons. Valuan ships take their cues from 19th and 20th century naval design to emphasize both their militarism and technological prowess. And as the resident East Asia analog, Yafutoman ships resemble Chinese junks. As for why these disparate designs can go toe-to-toe with each other, this is a game with sky whales, magic-powered colossi, and telescope eye patch monocles. It'd be dumb to start caring about realism now. Besides, who wouldn't want to see a wooden fishing vessel take out a top-of-the-line battleship? Or fight off the Hispano-British Sky Empire with an airship version of the space battleship Yamato?
波動砲を使用する。了解。艦首を目標へ向けます。はい、開けます。放水注入機作動。最終セーフティー解除。
薬室内、多気温粒子圧力上昇。
ターゲットスコープオープン。艦首軸線に乗った。対ショック。対先行防御。電影クロスゲージ0度20。照準固定。
発射まで。3、2、1。
波動砲発射。
Fuck, this game is awesome! In terms of pure graphical power, I'm not sure if Skies of Arcadia is actually pushing the Dreamcast to its limit, but I'll still confidently call this one of the best looking games on the system on pure personality alone. That brings us to the story. Now I know I've recapped the plot of most of the RPGs I've covered on this channel, but I don't really see the point in doing that here. As I said early on, Skies of Arcadia doesn't break any new ground with its story, and if I'm being frank, I worry that providing a play-by-play of its plot would actually make it seem less compelling than it really is. I'm a firm believer that a good story isn't about novelty or subversion of expectations. The true heart of a good story is in its characters. If you provide your audience with characters that they find compelling and give those characters entertaining dynamics with each other, then you can have the most cliché-riddled plot in the universe and no one will care because they'll want to see how these characters make it through. Skies of Arcadia understands this perfectly and offers up a huge cast of intriguing, fun, or outright screwball characters
Dr. Screwball, if you please, I've got an online PhD!
to entertain the player. Towering high above them all, though, is the damn near perfect main trio of Weiss, Aika, and Fina. Weiss's infectious optimism and can-do attitude, Aika's spunky tomboy personality and cat-like mannerisms, and Fina's wide-eyed idealism and gentle nature all work to make them great characters on their own, but even better as a trio. For lack of a better term, they exude big thruple energy, something the narrative seems to actually support. There are more than a few moments where you'd expect some form of jealous love triangle to be built up, only for Aika and Fina to be the best of gal pals almost right off the bat.
Bi-curious.
Legit, the rare moments they act possessive of Weiss is when he's distracted by another woman entirely. And when it comes to Weiss, he may well have become one of my all-time favorite RPG protagonists. The way his boundless well of determination is portrayed without a shred of irony is amazing. At a time when putting your protagonist through the ringer for maximum angst was almost required, the team at Overworks made the ballsy choice to show exactly how optimism wasn't a bad thing or a sign of immaturity. Perhaps the crowning moment of his worldview is when he calls out a tavern full of people who have given up on life after failing to make it through the storm wall separating the East and West. As someone who failed miserably to achieve his own dream of becoming a professional wrestler, Weiss's line telling them to replace that dream with a new one hit me right when I needed to hear something like that. Skies of Arcadia is littered with moments like this, reminders that life is worth living even at times when everything seems hopeless. It's the exact sort of genre reconstruction the RPG sphere needed at the time. There's nothing wrong with a deconstruction from time to time, but when it becomes all that's being made, the whole endeavor starts to wear thin. The best deconstructions, much like the best parodies,
The militants turned startled.
work because they're made by people who love what they're picking apart, not because being dark and edgy makes your story more grown up. And talking about edginess reminded me of something. Oh boy, this one's gonna be awkward. I do have to note one specific scene that clashes horribly with the rest of the game's tone. Those of you familiar with Skies of Arcadia probably already know what I'm talking about, but I'm gonna throw up a spoiler warning. A content warning as well for the tasteless attempt at a comedic depiction of sexual assault. Skip ahead to the timestamp on screen if you want to avoid spoilers or if you're bothered by the subject matter. At about the middle of the game, Weiss and crew are captured by Valua and brought to the capital to face execution. During their imprisonment, Admiral Vigoro attempts to have his way with Aika, and it's played for laughs. Okay, I'm not opposed to dark humor.
You killed my mother!
Sucks to be you.
But this was an uncomfortable sequence that doesn't just not fit at all with the rest of Skies of Arcadia tonally, it clashes with the sympathy the game expects the player to feel towards Vigoro later on, and requires Weiss to act completely out of character while he smiles and shrugs at seeing this unfold. Jokes like this require some level of absurdity in order to work. George?
Every joke needs one exaggeration. Every joke needs one thing to be way out of proportion.
That Aika is a 17-year-old trying to ward off the forced advances of an older man much larger and stronger than her makes it unsettlingly real, not funny. The writing afterwards almost seems to realize how fucked that whole scene was, as it's never mentioned again, and Vigoro is portrayed afterwards closer to an egotistical Johnny Bravo type who is convinced that Aika is into him.
Man, I'm pretty.
I'm just saying, that dynamic could have been easily established without including a scene where he tries to go full statutory. Okay, awkward part over, and welcome back to everyone who skipped to this point. Now let's do the same thing Skies of Arcadia itself does, and forget that this happened while we move on to something endearing. That's right, I went with the happy flying dolphin for my pirate flag.
Whoop-de-dingle-doo.
Look, Fina didn't understand the assignment. Could you tell her no? It even changes the icon on the VMU. Crap, I totally forgot to talk about the VMU integration. To get everyone unaware up to speed, the Dreamcast utilized these neat little devices they called Virtual Memory Units, or VMUs for short. Attempting to co-opt the Tamagotchi craze of the late 90s, VMUs didn't simply store your save data, but could also function as portable mini-game systems if you had a save from certain games. For Skies of Arcadia, the VMU was used in two other ways besides displaying your flag. The first is with Cupel, the little mascot character who functions as Fina's weapon in combat. If you feed him these hidden items called chams, Cupel will evolve into different, stronger weapon types, and the animation on the VMU when you feed him is cute as hell. The other VMU feature here is a minigame collection called Pinta's Quest. Early on, you'll meet this kid named Pinta who offers to share what he finds out on his adventures with you. From there, you can take your VMU out of the controller in between play sessions, unplugging the VMU when the system is off helps save battery life anyways, and play these little mini-games to earn extra spending money. Being mini-games and all, they're incredibly basic and mostly involve button mashing, but they're amusing enough for what they are. Then the next time you play Skies of Arcadia, all you have to do is select the Pinta's Quest option in the menu to obtain everything you collected. Also, apologies for the weird specs on the VMU screen. They wouldn't come off no matter how many times I wiped it down before recording. In the grand scheme of things, these features don't add a lot to the experience. However, it's so quintessentially Dreamcast that I can't in good conscience say that Skies of Arcadia would have been better off without them. There's plenty about Skies of Arcadia that I haven't talked about, but I can only cover so much in a reasonable span of time. Besides that, I'd prefer to leave things for those who haven't played this game yet to experience for themselves. Save for one uncomfortable scene you could easily cut and lose nothing, Skies of Arcadia is a fantastic game that deserves to be seen as one of the Dreamcast's finest moments. Its unique setting and delightful cast help buoy a proudly cliched tale which stands in defiance of the cynical nature of the RPG mainstream of the time. And though they're undone in the late game by how overpowered both your party and ship are by then, its dual battle systems are clearly compelling enough that I was able to reach that point in the first place. Against all odds, I consider this to have been worth every penny I paid for it. Though I still plan to spend the rest of my life kicking myself for not buying this as a kid, as this is the kind of game that I would have absolutely adored even back then. Tragically, Skies of Arcadia suffered the same fate as nearly every excellent game on the Dreamcast, failing to move anywhere near enough units to help keep the flagging system alive. Worse still, Legends would also underperform, leading to the cancellation of a planned sequel. Not long after that, Overworks would be consolidated into WoW Entertainment to create Sega WoW, before that would be consolidated back into Sega proper as a re-established AM1. Overworks' final game as a separate entity being the PS2 remake of Shinobi. Due to its low sales, second-hand copies of both versions of Skies of Arcadia go for well over $100. While I can justify that price thanks to my delusions of building a successful YouTube channel, I'm not delusional enough to assume that most people have that kind of money to burn on a retro game, plus have access to a working Dreamcast or GameCube. Which is why it would be great if Sega would get off their lazy asses and put out a remaster.
Ha ha ha! I wish.
I mean, come on, both Baten Kaitos games got remastered before Skies of Arcadia. At this point, it's starting to feel like someone high up has a grudge against this game. For the time being, we're left with no affordable way to play a game that far more people need to play. Well, nothing that I can endorse on this channel. It's a disgrace that I can buy all sorts of obscure ports and remasters on my Switch and on Steam, yet Skies of Arcadia has been trapped on the same two systems for over 20 years. Cosmic Fantasy 1 in English should be the pipe dream release, not one of the best games from Sega in their final years as a console maker. Man, that was a real downer of an ending for a video about such a happy game. I need something ridiculous to help me unwind. That'll do, pig. That'll do.